Lecture 9 in Managing People and Organizations was on managing globalization.
So, one first thing that was important to understand in this context of really, globalization across industries, but also across institutions, globalization of states, globalization of war and politics is what made possible globalization for business. So there was a context of less boundaries between countries, but there were a few other things that were also important. A first thing was the development of networks, networks of transport, allowing logistic to flow across boundaries and across countries and around the world. We think things being shipped across the planet with no difficulties, but also networks of communication, which allowed for easier coordination across countries, which made it possible to run a business based in Sydney and happening in Canada, for instance. Also having a global financial system that allows for the transfer of resources and for the financing of global projects. Many companies being listed in different places in the world. The development of cooperations, alliances across countries, and mergers that lead to the consolidation of big corporation, big ensemble that cover the world. I mean, if you want to develop quickly, buying a local company is clearly an easy way or a quick way to do that. So there was this global convergence of networks of resources that allowed for globalization.
There's a lot of global agreements as well, free trade agreements, for example, that facilitate this globalization or integration of financial systems, the bringing down of tariffs and other trade barriers to facilitate the free movement of goods and services and finance across borders. In a global context then, organizations, for example, where it might be more expensive to manufacture something in Australia, you can get that manufactured in China or another developing country at a fraction of the cost. And so a clothing brand then that's based in Sydney might be more just about design, whereas the actual manufacturing is outsourced to developing nations, and then the marketing and distribution might happen in other countries together again.
So that would be the differences of cost between countries that we drive globalization. Another aspect is that if you concentrate all your production in the same place, you have economies of scale. So you'll be able that not only your final cost will be down because you are producing in the country where it's the cheapest, but also you will actually produce bigger batches of your goods that you will distribute across the world. So another source for economies. And then you will benefit from another type of economies, which is leading to economies of scale, which is economies of scope, meaning that you cover a broader number of countries if you want. So your geographical area is broader with the same approaches and the same resources for production. So you cover a broader scope. It also can mean that because of the types of economies you have, you will use some of your assets across different activities. So your brand, for instance, again, a key asset for the organization, will be used across countries, but also across different types of products and services and goods, and all that happening across the world. So again, another type of economies is economies of scope.
Now, with globalization, we have, and the bringing down of barriers and the freer movement of goods and services and finance across barriers, organizations are getting bigger with these mergers and acquisitions. Organizations are getting bigger and more powerful, and this has some concern that in some instances the economies of these large multinational organizations are in fact bigger than nation states, and when they want to go in and invest, for example, in a smaller developing nation state, they come with all of that financial power, and it creates an unequal bargaining situation where the developing nation may be bullied to some extent because they're keen to get the investment, but they agree to terms that are so much in the favor of the multinational organization, and very much not in the favor of the individuals or the people in that developing nation.
So that there's a type of bargaining, and downscaling, for instance, labor conditions in some countries because they want desperately to attract these resources, and so it creates a tension between the interest and the stakes of transnational corporations and other stakeholders, including state, labor, and which leads to the fact that sometimes that the less powerful will become the losers of globalization.
And so this leads us to be somewhat ambivalent about globalization. There certainly are benefits. Certainly lots of opportunity has even been created for developing nations to lift them out of poverty, and that's a great thing. But there are these other aspects as well where there can be greater exploitation of peoples. So globalization has these two sides where it creates winners and it creates losers.
Thank you.